Hey everybody, Tim Albrecht here, and welcome to this week's episode of the Ask a YFP CFP segment of the Your Financial Pharmacist Podcast, where we feature questions from you, the YFP community, to be answered by one of YFP Planning's fee-only certified financial planners. Before we jump into today's question, I want to give a shout out to YFP Planning's incredible team that makes this segment possible. YFP Planning offers fee-only comprehensive financial planning that is customized to the pharmacy professional. So whether you want to optimize your investing plan, pay off student loans, or simply build a solid financial plan, YFP Planning will help get your income working for you rather than the other way around. You can learn more by visiting yfpplanning.com. Again, that's yfpplanning.com. Okay, this week's question comes from a recent webinar that we did. And Tim, the question is thoughts on refinancing higher interest rate loans on the Fed side and leaving the lower interest rate loans in the federal system. So sparsing out the loans, looking at the higher interest rate ones, perhaps refinancing those, but leaving the lower interest rate ones there. What are your thoughts?
I don't think this is a bad idea mathematically. I think it just depends on a few factors and like what you believe. And a lot of that goes into like looking at the crystal ball, and kind of predicting the future a little bit. So I think, if you believe that the Biden administration is done with forgiveness, then I would be more open to this path. And I think you can make a pretty good case that is the case. I think the Biden administration, used up a lot of political capital with the forgiveness. I don't think it made everybody happy. There's some people that thinks that, it should never have been given out. There's some people that think that, he needs to do more. So I would weight this one a little bit lower, in terms of like, I can't predict the future, but I would doubt there would be more forgiveness coming. I think the other thing that I would consider is, given the fact that, the economy isn't in the best spot, if you refi, do you get the same protections that the federal government offers? So the government will allow you to kind of turn off payments due to hardships, like if you were to lose a job. So that would be another thing that I would consider is like, I would be asking a refi company if the economy takes a turn for the worse and I get laid off, is that something that you'll work with me with? And sometimes because the refi companies or private companies are for profit, they don't necessarily have the flexibility that the U.S. government has. That's, backed by the full faith and credit of, the taxpayer and the government itself. So, it's kind of an unfair advantage competing with the government. So I would just be wary of that, given the economic climate. And then I think the last thing, Tim, would be just what is the refi rate? And back before, interest rates started to climb, you could get a good amount of like points shaving off your loans. So yeah. I would just want to see like what the delta is. So am I refinancing from usually I would say anything greater than 6% is high, but that might not be the case anymore just because of where interest rates have gone, in the last year. So I would want to weigh that with the delta of like, okay, am I going from a 7% to a 5% or a 6%? And then just kind of understand what the numbers, we always say that the student loans can be a very an emotional thing, but then overlay the numbers to help you guide your decision on what to do. So those would be the things I would consider. I think mathematically the concept makes sense, but I think if you overlay the future of forgiveness, what the protections would be if you do refi, and then what the refi rate actually would be, those would be the factors that I'm weighing as I'm looking at this decision to leave the federal government or not with regard to the loans.
Yeah, and Tim, we recently recorded with our two lead planners, Kelly Reddy Hefner, Robert Lopez. We did a special update on the student loan announcements and news that have come out of the Biden administration. And obviously, this is somewhat of a fluid situation as we're waiting for more details to come out. But based on what we know at this point in time, we talked a little bit about what they're calling the last extension, which will go through the end of the calendar year on the forbearance, the cancellation up to $20,000 depending on your income. And if you have Pell Grants, that higher amount of the $20,000 is a potential. And then also what we're seeing in a shift in a new income-driven repayment plan, again, waiting for more details. So I think it's a good opportunity. Here we are getting ready to go into the month of October. Good opportunity with these last few months of the year to really use this forbearance period to evaluate, what is my loan situation? What are the options that are out there? There's many. We've talked about before on this show how important it is to really get this decision right, not only mathematically, but as you mentioned, also considering, how do you feel about the debt and what else is going on in the financial plan. And so really taking advantage of this last pause period that we have on the interest as well as the payments to make sure we've got a good student loan repayment strategy. So we'll link in the show notes to that special podcast episode we did on the updates from the Biden administration. And, I would be remiss here if I didn't mention our student loan analysis service that we offer for folks that are really trying to answer this question. What is the best loan repayment strategy for my personal situation? This is a one-on-one consultation with one of our student loan experts and lead financial planners, Robert Lopez, Kelly Reddy Hefner. And you can learn more about that service and schedule an appointment at yourfinancialpharmacist.com/SLA. Thanks again for the question that came in. As I mentioned, that came from a recent webinar. We do webinars throughout the year. And if you have a question that you'd like us to feature on an upcoming episode of this podcast, you can record that question by going to yourfinancialpharmacist.com/ask-YFP, or you can also send us an email, info@yourfinancialpharmacist.com. As we wrap up this week's episode, an important reminder that the content on this podcast is for informational purposes only, is not intended to provide and should not be relied on for investment or any other advice. You can learn more about this by visiting yourfinancialpharmacist.com/disclaimer. Thanks for listening and have a great rest of your week.